Hello, well, welcome to another episode of Conversations about Priesthood. My name is Vanessa, but I'm also known as V. And today, I'm really looking forward to the conversation today, actually, because I'll be having a conversation with the Revd Tim, who is also a dear friend of mine, a man of wisdom. And so, Tim, welcome. Thank you for kind of being here.
Great to be here with you, V, to encourage you and all that you're doing. And don't ask me any questions I can't answer. Okay.
I'll try not to. Wonderful. Would you like to just very briefly just introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Tim. I'm Tim Saiet. I'm a vicar of St. John's Church in Hildenborough in Kent. And I've been here 8 years now with my wife, Charlotte, and my children. And I was a full-time evangelist before that, did a curacy at St. Paul's, Ealing with Mark Mellowish, and trained in theology at Wycliffe Hall in Oxford.
Wonderful.
I'd say that's it. If it was non-Christians, I'd say I have a different thing. But for those who are watching, I'm just explaining a bit of my churchmanship, really.
I love that. Thank you so much, Tim. And again, I know I said this at the start, but yeah, I'm always blown away by your wisdom and your encouraging presence. And I'm just going to delve straight into this. What is your understanding of priesthood?
Well, when you go for ordination, when I did, it was quite a long process for me, I think. And I read Calder College by Francis Dewar, Being a Priest Today, I think by Mike Ramsey, and great books. And I think what's interesting is the role of the priest in one way is unchanging, but the role of a vicar is often different from the role of a priest. And because much of the stuff they train you for as a priest, they don't train you for as a vicar. For example, when I arrived here, I was trained in churches without a graveyard. And I had to learn on my feet how to manage a graveyard and deal with disposal of people's remains from ashes to burial, deal with burial records and stuff. But, the theology technically goes, I think, from the Church of England, there are three things that I can do that I'm licensed to do: consecrate, bless, and absolve. And I do all the other jobs, but they're the three jobs I think the Anglican Church has said we do those three things.
But anybody can volunteer for every role. We're the priesthood of all believers, and I believe that everybody
ought to be a priest and work in a sense for the kingdom of God, and to have this priestly role of communicating the hope and love of God to people. So there are, two camps really. So some people say, well, the priest, this high Anglican view of a cleric, this view of the priesthood, that only the priest can serve the communion, only the priest can absolve, and only the priest can bless. I actually, in my heart, believe anybody can do that if it's appropriate and set up and agreed. And, but on the other hand, I'm an Anglican, so I abide with the rules of the Anglican Church. That's what they expect me to do. But I try and get everybody to get involved with everything they do, everyone to use all the gifts. Make a vow. I made a vow that everybody I would develop the gifts of everybody to help everybody contribute, rather than me on the pitch and them watching me, this clerical view. I want to be on the pitch with them or on the sidelines cheering the church on as they enter into all their gifts. But I think the role of the priest, if you look at the Levitical role of the priest, where God chose the priest, they had certain roles. They looked after the temple, and 10% tithe was given to provide for them. And God chose even what they wore, in a sense. Some people argue that the priest is God's man or woman representing him symbolically. However you see it, I think a lot of the jobs we do are not as difficult as the job of leading God's people. Moses had a problem with it. It's going to be hard. So the next few years, I think the question will become for the priest is whether we have lay presidency, a lay person can take communion. Now, if you're believing in the priesthood of all believers, then all you have to do is train that person what to do. They read the words on the screen or from the book, and they lead communion. That can be done with not too much training. I think yet someone else will say, well, what about blessing? Well, that can be done with not too much training. Just read the words and do the blessing, you know. But the hard thing is leadership. So people say, well, the priest is meant to, you know, be a servant. That's brilliant. But the problem is, you know, I'm managing on my day-to-day HR, tax, finances with the church. I'm dealing with safeguarding, risk assessments, all things that me as the priest is getting involved with in the church and doing, which are far from the consecrate, bless and absolve. There are other jobs. But if you ask me, out of all the jobs that I do, the hardest thing of all of them is to lead God's people, because you're leading volunteers, especially. And everybody has, we're in this culture of everybody has an opinion, which is brilliant. But a lot of people, you know, if they don't like what you're doing, or how you're managing that with your team and the PCC and stuff, you know, they'll just leave sometimes and go to somewhere else. And it's trying to make sure that you get everybody working together with all their complexities and beautiful differences and uniqueness, and get them working together as one group to serve God in the community. And I'd say my role as a priest is to try and help facilitate that to happen. I'm not saying it's easy, it's really difficult, because, you know, I do think you need some kind of life experience. I remember them saying, you know, when you join to be signed up to be ordained, you know, they've turned people back who didn't have enough life experience. And it wasn't that they didn't think they could do the job. I think what I've learned from that is to deal with all the challenges of people. You might have senior people who've got a lot of experience in managing, also getting their own way in business and stuff. And if you're not a bit sure of who you are and have a little bit of life experience, it's very easy to be bowled over or overwhelmed and just give in. Actually, then you make decisions which aren't really helpful for the church because you're scared, you know. I'm an older guy, and I still face those challenges where I have to go, oh, I've got to grit my teeth here, you know, and this is going to be hard, but this isn't right. I've got to make a decision. It might be unpopular. So I think the role of the priest, if I was just doing the role of the priest without all the other things, I think my life would be easier, but it's more complex than just the role of the priest being a vicar leading a church. You know, you know, no one trained me how to deal with historical burial records. Taught me how to deal with managing grade 2 listed historic buildings. All those things. I know you said that's a warden's job, but if we get new wardens, they look to me and say, well, what do we need to know? You know, it's a huge role. No, it's a huge privilege. It's a huge privilege, and everybody majors and minors on what their calling is. For me, I'm essentially an evangelist with an apostolic calling, who is coming to the role of being a vicar. And I think the previous 2 vicars had a very great role of being pastoral. You can't box people in, you know, that, but they had a wonderful gift at that. And in my role of coming in, it's more to help us get through this season of world change as we faced, you know, COVID and all the anxieties over the war in Ukraine. People watch this that might have moved on, you know, but we faced a lot of coming out of Brexit, people being concerned. And the priest's role really was to steady the ship and not let people get overwhelmed and panic, and to make sure we focus on hope.
And that's, I mean, gosh, a lot of wisdom in some of the things that you were just talking about. And that kind of, in a way, you've kind of answered the question that I was going to ask you next, which is what are some of the challenges? So I guess what I would like to hear from you is, what are some of the joys?
Well, the joy, I mean, you know, the days are gone where a church says they want a vicar, a leader, priest, but what they really want is a chaplain. Now, a chaplain has a fantastic role, but it's a slightly different role from priest in the local church of the community. because there are certain limitations on a chaplain in a hospital, in a prison, that the government places upon them. And we have them, but they're different. But the joy here is one of my great joys is seeing people who don't know anything about faith suddenly get it. One of the other great joys is watching people in the church develop their gifts, because they've got so many gifts and God can take them so deeply in them. And that comes from the discipleship and watching people, because what happens is we tend to live our life and we hit a wall, or we hit what's called a plateau. And the only way to get to the next bit is to work really hard. And the priest, I come in as the vicar, and I really encourage them, no, don't give up, work hard, study, spend time with God, let's get you on some courses, boom, boom, boom. And it feels hard. And then they do it and they come alive and they go, oh, I'm so grateful that I've done this. And suddenly, so the joy for me is watching people enter into the fullness and wholeness God has for them.
Yeah.
One of the challenges is, there's this culture of sometimes people want a mild-mannered vicar to do a mild-mannered sermon to a mild-mannered congregation, none of which Jesus was. And sometimes we have to tell people things they don't want to hear. I'm not saying I'm right when I do that, but if we have an honest self-belief, we have to say this to you. But if they hear it and it is right and it is God, watching the freedom that they can actually move in. We're developing a lot of discipleship at the moment.
Wow.
Doing this course is talking about you can't be spiritually whole, mature, and emotionally immature. They have to match. And there's been a lot of focus, I think, on biblical knowledge and pastoral work. But we really want to add to that emotional maturity, because God gives us emotions. If you look in the Psalms, this huge picture of emotions from the Psalms. We want to help people process that and have a voice for that, and that they can understand that their emotions are important, but they don't dominate us. They're there as a gift. And also to help them develop their passions through their emotions, to find their calling. So their gifting and their passion gives them an identity, a sort of direction for their calling. I love watching people step into that.
Wow, I love it. I mean, gosh, like you could write a whole book on this. It's such a huge, even the question of what are some of the joys and challenges of priestly ministry. I mean, that is a huge question that one could unpack. My final question, and it's actually one of the questions that I always look forward to asking, is, do you have any words of encouragement or wisdom for those who may be exploring whether God is calling them to ordained ministry? And there's a long pause.
Absolutely. People often say that, some people have said, and I think it's true for many, if God's called you for ordination, he's given you signs that you may or may not have picked up through your life. And it's only when you enter into the process, you look back and see the signs. I don't know if that's true, but it was for me. The second thing is, a lot of people are put off by entering for ordination because they look at the vicar, like look at me. I've had 7 years training, been ordained 12 years, whatever. And they go, oh, I can't be like that. Well, of course, you can't initially be me because you're you. But also, you're looking at me after all those years of training. If you feel God's calling you to be ordained, it's your duty and joy, really, to explore that. And the team in the diocese that you're in, they discern that with you. But you're not the finished article. You go through your theological training and God grows you and shapes you and matures you and builds you. And even then, when you do a curacy, it's a process, and then when you become a vicar, you're learning again. And now I've been ordained 13 years. And every day I literally I'm confronted with something I don't know what to do.
Wow.
And the beauty of that is when you get ordained, when you get licensed and ordained, the bishop says, you cannot do this on your own.
That's right.
You need God's help. So it's great. I go to God, Lord, I have no idea what's there. I could go down 4 rabbit holes. you, Lord, please give me wisdom, tell me what to do. And I know I won't hurt anybody by making the decisions without them thought through.
Yes. Yeah.
So my advice is go for it. Don't look at the finished article. See yourself as in rebuild and molding. It's like, oh, you are the IKEA box, and the church's job is to put you together. And after you're ordained, you start coming into shape and the pieces are in. But it's a lifelong journey of growth.
Absolutely. And I mean, that goes with everything. It's a lifelong journey. Yeah, gosh.
I would say one thing, though. If you've suffered a lot, if you've suffered and been through difficult times, that you might think, oh, that will disqualify me. But actually, the greatest ministry I have is when I've suffered, and I have suffered a lot at times in my life. I can come along when people know you understand their pain and suffering. It's not saccharine, it's authentic sugar in a way. They can spot an imposter. And so your suffering, Jesus, when he read the scrolls in Isaiah, he said, I've come to proclaim good news to the poor. That was the first thing he said. And the poor are often suffering. So when you suffer, you align yourself with the message and mission of Jesus. You understand the brokenness of the world and others, and it gives you a beautiful qualification to minister. It's not about doing great sermons, it's about loving the Lord and loving the poor and the broken and being God's hands and feet to them.
Yeah, and it's about loving all people,
Yeah. And listen, I've had people that have criticized me heavily. I've had people that whatever. I don't take it personally because I see a lot of their trauma and pain and heartache, their growth, their childhood, their their upbringing in school, and a lot of that. And sometimes they can't, it seeps out of them and it effervesces out. And something I do that they don't like, it just comes out of them and I get the blame. And I don't take it personally. And what I say to the church is, don't expect me to be a good leader. Really, it's a key not to do that. I'm not a good vicar, a good leader. Expect me to be a faithful vicar and a faithful leader, because I can be faithful as much as I can. But the only one who's good is Jesus. So stop, let's not put people on a pedestal. We're all broken and in rebuild anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a really pertinent point to end on. Tim, thank you so much for the wisdom that you've shared. Thank you so much for your time. And for those of you that are watching or will be watching, I hope this conversation has been of encouragement to you. And yeah, if you would like to hear in any of these series, do get in touch with me and I'll be delighted to have a chat with you about all things priesthood. Until next time, bye.